The inmate, special meal is served at 4 o'clock. He is then able to visit with family from 4:30 that day until 7:30 that evening. At 7:30, his visitations are concluded for the evening. He is permitted telephone access throughout the night at any time that he chooses to make any phone calls. Those calls do have to be made collect. So throughout the evening, he has the option to watch television, read, listen to the radio, and again, he's being observed. And he receives periodic revisits from both the Religious Service Administrator for the Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections, unless he has requested not to receive those visits, from mental health staff to check on his progress, and from members of the execution team. The next morning, he is permitted to then visit again with friends and family cell front. So he is no longer permitted to have any contact visits. The contact visit could occur the day before, but at 6:30 the following morning, he is permitted cell front visits where 2 at a time, his friends or family can come over and visit with him through this holding cell door. That wraps up at 8:30, but his lawyer and spiritual advisor can stay with him a short period of time later. Approximately an hour prior to the execution at 9 o'clock, he's permitted to shower and dress in the clothes that he will wear for the execution. And he continues to receive any spiritual counseling by the Religious Services Administrator that he elects to have. 15 minutes prior to the scheduled execution, the warden will approach the cell front door, read to him the death warrant that has authorized his execution. It's also in this holding cell that the IV lines are inserted. So when I spoke in the witness area of those 2 television screens coming on and the witness is observing the IV lines being inserted, the inmate is laying on this bed as that happens. Execution team members who are trained and qualified to insert IV lines insert those lines on this bed. Under the execution protocol, they are to establish 1 or 2 IV sites. The former execution protocol required 2 sites, but now with the inclusion of a backup system, they may only start 1 site if they can't get the second site started. That's all done on the video monitors. You're able to see that process occur if you witness.
Is that new, the video?
No, that is not new. That was actually in use for Ron Melbourne.
Is that videotaped?
It is not.
Is it not?
It is not. It's only for observation by the witnesses. The execution team is permitted as much time as they need to insert those IV lines. We do not put a time limit on them, nor do we want them to feel rushed in doing that. They take a lot of effort to do their jobs professionally and compassionately, and so they take a lot of time in inserting those IV lines appropriately. You will see, if you're witnessing, the inmate's arms are strapped to a board. There's an IV line. We use a heparin lock for that IV line to keep that IV line open, and we test the IV site with a saline flush. The inmate is then assisted off of the bed, and that's when the video screens in the other room will go dark. He's then escorted 17 steps from this room into the execution chamber, and that's where we'll go next. Any questions before we leave this area, though?
Where are the contact visits? Do they happen here?
No, there's a room that Larry, the contact visits, there's a room.
Is it in this building, or do they go?
It's connected right back here to this building. Yes.
How many steps were there, you said?
17 steps from the holding cell to the execution chamber. Approximately, depending on how large your steps are. Generally, it's about 17 steps. This is an area that's never been used before during immediate time. end, and it's where the drugs that are used to carry out the execution are administered from. So you'll see phone lines on the wall. These phones are the phones that remain open in case there's any legal action that occurs that would postpone the execution or halt the execution. So basically, there's not a whole lot to this room. This is where the illegal injection is carried out. The inmates escorted into this area by the execution team members. They assist him in climbing onto the bed. He does climb onto the bed himself. He lays down, he's strapped to the bed, and his arms are strapped to these bars here. You'll see this hole in the wall. This is where I told you the tubing comes out through here, and that's the room the drugs are administered from. You'll see that this glass here is somewhat dark. That room remains dark, so during an execution you can't see into that room. So the inmate lays on the execution table. A member of the execution team who is trained in administering IV drugs comes in, inserts the tubing into the heparin locks, and checks that. And then the execution team exits the room. The warden and the execution team leader remain in the room with the offender. At that time, once the execution team person who is trained to administer IV drugs is satisfied that the IV sites are established, the warden will take the microphone there on the wall and take it up to the offender's mouth and offer the offender the opportunity to say any final words. The inmate does not have to tell us beforehand if he chooses to make a final statement. He does not have to write it down and have it approved. He is able to make any final statement that he wishes to make, and for as long as he wishes to make it, as long as it's reasonable. I think the longest we've had was 7 or 9 minutes, something like that. They can also choose not to make a statement. The warden will give a signal, one that you probably won't notice, and that is a signal for the execution team member who is trained to administer IV drugs to start the flow of drugs to the inmate. Once the flow of drugs starts, again, under the new execution protocol, that would be 5 grams of the pentyl sodium, and it's administered using 5 syringes.